planning and zoning rep that attends. I think we have sound. Great. So I'll call the meeting to order at 4:05. Our first order of business is introductions. So why don't we start with, how about the old people first? I'll introduce myself. I'm John Nauman. I've been on the Water Commission for, I don't know, 2-3 years now. So I'm fairly inexperienced, but I come from the chemistry department over at NAU. I ran the instructional lab program there and had a lot to do with laboratory safety and such. So that's kind of my background. So, Rob? Oh, Don? Thank you. And just for new people who haven't been here before, for your mic, you need to press the button and hold it down. So, sorry. Rob.
Okay, thank you for the reminder on the button. Rob Vane, I've been on the commission for roughly half a year. Come from a background with mechanical engineering and a variety of alternate energy involvements, and have served with the Flagstaff Water Group.
I'll just go down the list. Ron Dova.
Good afternoon, Ron Doba, and this is my first Water Commission meeting. I have been involved in Flagstaff water issues since the mid-1980s and actually worked with the city of Flagstaff for 21 years prior to my retirement.
Haley Paul.
Oh, hi, everybody. My name's Haley Paul, and I am new to the commission as well. Thank you so much. Moved to Flagstaff in 2021 and just really excited to get involved here locally. And my past life, I worked at the town of Gilbert in the water department, and then currently in my day job today, Arizona policy director for Audubon Southwest.
Corinne Wadsack.
Thank you. Karin Wadzak, and this is actually the first meeting of my third round at the Water Commission, which started, I think this is my career, it started 12 years ago or something like that. I work in renewable energy at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I've been working in renewables for about 20 years. Before that, I worked in water systems with the Peace Corps in Bolivia. And then at some point after I moved back to Flagstaff in 2008. I was on the stakeholder group that worked on the rainwater ordinance, which I think is how I got here in the first place. So very happy to be back. Thanks.
Matthew Garcia.
Matthew Garcia. I am born and raised here in Flagstaff. I've been in the water area for 26 years. I am a water distribution operator as well as a treatment operator, certified with the state. And this is my first stint at the Water Commission, so I figured I'd throw my hat in there.
Ian Sharp.
Yeah, hi everybody. Ian Sharp. I'm a civil engineer here in town, and I am from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Well, all I can say is we have a fantastic group of new people, great experience balance, I think, so it should bode well for the future. And we have a lot of very important decisions coming up this year. So let's move on to roll call. Do we need to do the roll call? I think we can skip that. So public participation. Public participation enables the public to address the commission about an item that is not on the agenda. If you wish to address the commission, please state your name and address for the record. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on an item which is not listed on the prepared agenda. The commission members may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask the staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. Public comments should be limited to 3 minutes reading time. Do we have any public participation right now?
We do have public participation, but that's after Aaron's presentation.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Chair, I would like to introduce myself and our interim water director. I am Vice Mayor Sweet, and I've served as, or I am continuing to serve as the Water Commission liaison, City Council. And if you ever need anything or have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm on, I think, 3 different water organization boards, et cetera. So I'm becoming pretty versed in all of this, and I welcome all of you. It's great to see some fresh faces. Thank you.
Thanks, Miranda.
Lee Williams, Operations Section Director and currently Interim Water Services Director. And have my roots in plant operation and the NAU chemistry labs also.
Anybody else want to introduce themselves? We have a couple of notable people here. Aaron? Okay. Brad Hill? Okay. All right. Just didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings here. Okay. Approval of minutes. So I'm not quite, there were only 3 of us here who were at the meeting, but can I have a motion to approve the minutes from December 17th?
I would approve the minutes as written.
Do you have a comment? Okay.
Yes. I guess I'm taking exception under item 6A, the final paragraph. I don't believe the timing I guess I'm questioning whether the timing here is what was as it was discussed. It says in the minutes, Aaron said the timing for January will work. And it's my understanding we're really not trying to get on a January council meeting agenda. If you don't have a copy, I can read this out loud.
Well, I did review the minutes, and I thought that was in reference to being on this January Water Commission meeting, not a January City Council agenda. So if it needs to be corrected to read the timing for a January Water Commission meeting, that would make sense.
I'll just read briefly here. The deadline, reading from the minutes, the deadline to get the information for the council packet is January 8th. Aaron said the timing for January will work. And I guess I read that as meaning getting the packet in for the council meeting in January. And I think we're not aiming to do that. Is that correct?
Correct. We're not aiming to do that. I think we were discussing with Shannon Anderson the timing, so maybe it needs to be reviewed from the video to correct it. I don't know how to correct it because that was what we were talking about, but now the meeting is in February 18th, I believe.
Right, and I think during the meeting, Shannon had offered a meeting date in February, which I took as the date we're aiming for, but maybe we can just glance back at that and correct if necessary. Thank you.
Okay, Don, you want to approve the motion with the changes made?
I would amend the motion to approval as amended.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, carries. Let's move on to item number 5, new business.
Excuse me, Chair. I have a question regarding procedure. Since there are only 3 of us here when the last meeting minutes were approved, do we constitute a quorum from the old
I
board?
was thinking about the same thing. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
What is the question? We're definitely
Well,
quorum today. And we
Okay,
were
well,
last time.
we're approving, we, the members that were here during um, during the last meeting, December 19th, are approving, the meeting minutes from that meeting, but do we constitute a quorum, from the members that were attending at that meeting? And I believe there were, 6 commission members at that meeting.
Be close enough. Well, I forgot to call for a vote, so let's have a vote. Commissioner Pills,
Approve.
Commissioner Bain,
Approve.
and I approve too. So the motion passes.
I guess Don was questioning though whether 3 of us can approve,
Well,
but I don't see a remedy though. So
neither do I, so we'll just move on.
let's just approve it.
We can't ask the new members to vote on something they've never, weren't there, so, okay. Let's move on to new business, item number 5, elect new Water Commission Chair and Vice Chair. So I'm going to ask the floor for any submissions for the chairman of the Water Commission. Anybody? You can self-nominate, you can nominate somebody else, however you'd like to
I
do
would
it.
nominate John Nauman as the new chair. The reasons being, John was the past vice chair. He has a fair amount of familiarity with the business of the commission, and he's sat in during meetings in the past when the chairman was not present, and he's undertaken duties, assignments as requested by the chair.
Is there any other nominations on the floor? Would hurt my feelings if there was.
Mr. Chairman, are you interested in the position of chair?
Kind of lukewarm. I'll do it if needed, but if there's somebody else who would like to do it, that would, and feels called to do it, jump in.
May I ask, Mr. Doba, would you be interested in the position, recognizing your long history with water issues in this area?
I think I would be interested if our vice chair was not interested. I think our typical protocol has been if the vice chair is interested in the position, then normally the role of chair has gone to that individual.
Well, I've just had some stuff going on in my personal life that would probably be best if I didn't do the chair position at this time, if I could avoid it. So if anybody feels called to step in, that'd be great. So.
Mr. Chairman, if you would prefer not to take on the position of chair, I'd be interested in it if the commission is interested in that role.
Okay. I'm not really super versed in Robert's rules, but I've assumed that's a self-nomination, which is fine. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. Any comments? Okay, let's have a vote. Just circle around.
In favor?
In favor?
In favor?
In favor?
In favor.
Aye.
In favor of Ron.
Well, the motion passes and you are now the chair. Let's, I think we do.
I forgot the button. I think they need to trade chairs.
You're doing a good job.
Okay, well, thank you. And that still leaves us with the question of the role of the vice chair. So do we have anybody on the commission that is interested in the role of vice chair?
Ron, Chair, I believe that John is still the vice chair. So does he wish to continue as vice chair?
I will continue if needed, but if there's somebody, I think you're actually the longest serving person currently on the commission, so you would be a good person to take that role too. And Rob Vane would be excellent, and they're both experienced and been on the commission for at least 2 years or more, so.
Do we have a nomination for vice chair?
I defer to Don's seniority, and so I nominate Don Bills.
Nomination's been made. Do we have a second?
I would second that motion.
All in favor of Don Bills as vice chair of the Water Commission? Please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Welcome, Don.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 5B of new business. We have an update, I believe, on resiliency and redundancy water resources planning. Aaron, are you going to take this one on? I'll turn it over to you then.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome commissioners, new commissioners. My name is Erin Young. I'm the Water Resources Manager. I've been in hydrology for over 20 years. I graduated from Arizona State University in 2000 with a degree in geology, and then a master's here at NAU with another degree in geology in 2006, and I've worked here at the utility like 11 years. So that's a little background about myself, and like Vice Mayor Sweet, I'm always available if you have any questions. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can, and welcome. So today we'll be providing you with an update on our water resources planning scenarios. So as a lot of you are aware, water resource planning changes every day with changing assumptions, changing metrics, and we incorporate those numbers and metrics into our long-term water plans and develop ranges for when we might need new supplies. So that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. And I'll be introducing Brad Hill. Brad is serving as a consultant for the city, a professional services consultant. He was a director of the utility and the first water resources manager, actually, in I think 2007, 6, and served as director for 10 years. So he's got a lot of background and history with the utility as well. The agenda stems from a presentation we made to the commission in July. Jacobs Engineering presented a feasibility study for a water pipeline from Red Gap Ranch. In that presentation, we had a couple slides on the timing for Red Gap Ranch, and we realized we were too short of time to really go into too much detail. And we allowed Jacobs the allotted time during that meeting to present their full engineering study. We shared with the Water Commission, we'll come back to you with more detail on the water planning side. I'll present an overview of our water resources and an introduction to, and then Brad, I'm sorry, will provide the introduction to water resource planning and projections and what we're calling our resiliency and redundancy scenario planning work. Yes.
If we have any questions, would you like us to hold them till the end of the presentation or bring them up during the presentation?
I feel if you would like an answer right away or feel I could clarify something quickly, feel free to interrupt.
Okay, thank you.
Just Quick overview of our water resources. We pull water from the inner basin of the San Francisco Peaks. We collect spring water. It infiltrates into the ground, and we have a pipeline network that delivers that spring water to Northwest Flagstaff. We also have some shallow wells within the inner basin that we pump water from during the summer months only. And also that interbasin supply is collected during the summer months. Once snow melts and we can turn that water into our distribution system, the turbidity lowers to a point that we can deliver through our distribution system. Interbasin can make up about 20% of our water supply in the summer months. We have delivered water from Upper Lake Mary since early 40s. And then groundwater supplies, we started drilling deep groundwater wells in the 1950s. We have about 11 to 12 or so wells in the Woody Mountain well field. We have about the same number of wells in the Lake Mary well field. And then we have our inner city wells. It wasn't really until the 1990s we started drilling wells within city limits, which was the first time we weren't exporting water from outside city limits. So that wasn't until the 1990s. And in 2005, the city, after a bond initiative, purchased Red Gap Ranch east of Flagstaff. You'll hear a lot about that. 40 miles east of Flagstaff. It's 85, I think, don't quote me, 8,500 acres, 7,500 acres of city-owned property, checkerboarded with state land for a total of like 16,000 acres or so, but plus or minus, don't quote me on that. And that's a future water resource or maybe more of a near-term water resource, depending on the policies that City Council elects for resiliency and redundancy. On reclaimed water, we've been delivering Class A+ quality since the mid-1990s and early 2000s. We'll get into that in the next talk on reclaimed water rates. We have, there are a couple bullets that made it on the bottom, so ignore those bottom two. The mistake. Our water supply considerations that play into the updated scenarios that Brad developed. Surface water, obviously prolonged by long-term drought. Upper Lake Mary, when it replenishes to 100%, we can generally pull like 3 years of water from that during the peak summer months. And if we had no recharge from snowmelt into Upper Lake Mary in the spring, we can get like 3 years out of the lake without additional inflow. We don't manage it. We don't pump as much water as we could from it any longer. We balance pump water from Upper Lake Mary with groundwater. Surface water obviously can be impacted by wildfires as we've experienced locally. Groundwater, we do have localized overdraft, especially in the Lake Mary well field area. Woody Mountain and local wells, many of those wells are actually fairly stable after pumping for several decades. Our infrastructure can also be impacted by wildfires, and in some cases, aquifer recharge can be impacted by wildfires. Reclaimed water, it used to be the supply that grows with the community, but as we reduce with our water conservation, we're not getting, a lot of water back with every flush anymore. We're kind of not growing as fast as we used to with population growth. And water quality is a concern or consideration with how we use water, reclaimed water in our community, with ADQ just now soon to adopt rules for advanced water purification. That's a new reuse that utilities will have for reclaimed water. There's little availability in Flagstaff for new customers in the summer months. We pretty much deliver everything we can process in the summer when demand is high for irrigation. Shoulder months, we have a lot of water available, with the exception of Arizona Snow Bowl. They can take 1.5 million gallons a day in the winter months. And Reuse options such as advanced water purification, or if we do recharge, aquifer recharge, the options we feel favor those that have storage capacity, just because our daily demand is highly variable to where we have no water available some days to 6 MGD other days or more. Here's some hydrographs just showing the Lake Mary wellfield groundwater impacts over time since we started pumping in that area in the 70s. You're seeing on the right the depth to water, a 400-foot drop over that time. Our staff have been kind of relaxing pumping from that area just to see if those wells recharge. And then the Woody Mountain area is just a much more stable groundwater system. We have a designation of adequate water supply. So now I'll jump into water management briefly. The 1980 Groundwater Management Act created the Assured and Adequate Water Supply Program for areas outside of active management areas, which is where there was a lot of groundwater depletion around that time. So Phoenix, Tucson, there was a lot of groundwater depletion. AMAs were created. Outside of that area is the Adequate Water Supply Program, which we partake in. And our city council in around 2007 or so directed staff to get a designation of adequate water supply. It ties future water demand through land use planning to water supplies, available water supplies for the 5 criteria. We had to prove that the wet water, the physical availability of all the resources that I just touched on, Lake Mary, or Upper Lake Mary, and our groundwater wells, that we can model that there's 100 years of water available, sustainable water available, I should say, not just depletion, but they have sustainability criteria. We have legal right to the water. The water is available through our infrastructure systems. We have the financial capability through water rates. This is a consumer protection program to protect people who invest in a community that there's a 100-year water supply. So this is a voluntary action that the city took. And we achieved our designation of adequate water supply in 2013. And that is here, actually, on this slide where we've listed out the water demands for the different water resources we have. And I could go into these numbers in more detail. Brad will touch on them, but they're a little bit not super straightforward what all of these are. So if we want to talk about them, maybe we'll come back. Let's see.
Chair, question for Aaron. Red Gap Ranch shows a total acre feet of 16,500 per year. I had thought that the city had an agreement with the Navajo Nation that limits that amount to about 8,000 acre feet per year. Am I mistaken?
So Chairman and Vice Chair Bills, that agreement was never adopted within the state adjudication of water rights. That was an agreement or discussions had at that time. From my understanding, that agreement is not, it's not a settlement type agreement. And it's been updated or is being updated with discussions currently. And we might have someone else who wants to address that question in a legal manner online if they want to jump in. The 16,500 acre feet was a modeling number that was developed as like a sustainable development number. And then the other volume you mentioned, Vice Chair, was more of a water planning number, not based on hydrology and how much water could be sustainably developed from the ranch.
Thank you for the clarification.
Aaron, could I ask you a quick question too? This may be not right on topic, but when you develop Red Gap Ranch, what volume are you going to target for annual delivery?
That is a moving target, I would say, and we don't have a number because it depends on a lot of different scenarios. And it's also, there's such great potential for the pipeline to serve the region. It was identified in maybe the mid-2000s through the Coconino Plateau Watershed Partnership efforts with the Bureau of Reclamation as one alternative for regional water development. So it really depends.
I guess you could say the number you listed is like a maximum amount, but how much of the water Flagstaff actually gets is yet to be determined.
I think that's a fair statement, what we actually get or what we actually use. But for getting our designation of adequate water supply, these are the volumes of water on the right that we pledged, that we were able to prove physical availability, continuous availability in those. In our designation, actually, I believe continuous availability is tied to us building the pipeline to Red Gap. So when you see these water demands on the left, the 2011 current and committed and projected demand total of 14,000 acre feet. If we trigger Red Gap Ranch, it's not continuously available under our designation until we build the pipeline. So if we don't build it, but we need the demand, where we would be at risk of losing our designation. ADWR would say, you don't have the continuous availability, you're no longer 100-year designated. And I guess I could dive in real quick to the numbers. The 2011 current water demand, that's our total deliveries in 2011 when we applied for the designation, and that includes reclaimed water, about 2,000 acre feet a year of reclaim. The committed demand are parcels that could turn water on any time. They have a building permit, they might be issued a C of O, certificate of occupancy, where water will turn on. That's committed demand. Projected demand is based on our regional plan, city or voter adopted regional plan of available lands or unbuilt properties and the volume associated with that build out. And then every year we submit our actual numbers and we revise these every year with the Department of Water Resources. At the time, the growth projections assumed 1.2% growth per year. This is one of our scenario graphs, and we have hundreds of these. Brad will provide you with the updated resiliency and redundancy graphs, but this one is our base case scenario, and these are the volumes pledged in our designation of adequate water supply. The metrics within this, or the assumptions within this of projected demand, that number can change. This one happens to be the ECONA, what ECONA just published in November last year, I believe. We also estimate gallons per capita per day water use. In this case, we used 95 total gallons per capita per day. That was a 7-year average. Last year we were 89, I believe. That's a total water use throughout the entire community.
Aaron, that includes commercial and institutional use. It's not just residential, correct?
Correct. And then we stopped the graph at about 172,000 population, using that 1.2% growth rate, but we'll go into some other scenarios. And then we have in here sandwiched the different supplies to meet those demands. In this base case scenario, this triggers a new water resource in 2052. And yes, so Brad will dive into a lot of these.
Aaron, I'd just like to get some clarification on a couple of these things that jumped out at me on this particular graph, if I could. When we look at the direct delivered reclaim water for irrigation use, that's just a straight line for all those years. We're not anticipating any increases.
Correct. That is our designation volume, which holds constant for all.
For our designation of adequacy?
Yes.
Okay. Um,
It also assumes
And
that the
what-
volume of surface water doesn't change every year, that is variable.
What is recovered reclaim? Is that indirect recharge?
Yes, that is the volume we estimate that is recovered down gradient of our Rio to Flag water reclamation plant. We have two water reclamation plants, and the Wildcat plant is in northeast Flagstaff, discharging towards the county, and we have no recovery wells upstream of those releases, which is another 3,000 acre feet.
Okay. That's kind of what I thought it was, but in looking at this, I see a horizontal bar for the estimated natural recharge and another one for the recovered reclaim, and then another one above that for local groundwater. Does that bar signify groundwater mining?
It does not.
It does not?
It does? Maybe Brad can touch
Okay.
on that it,
All right, thanks, Brad.
the difference between the lighter brown and the darker brown, where the darker brown would be groundwater mined.
That's what I'm referring to, the darker brown.
Gotcha.
Yes.
However, yeah, that's a number, the estimated natural recharge, actually, that's a number that we really can do a better job of estimating. It's kind of generic.
Okay, thank you.
Could do a little work on this graph after those questions. Water conservation strategic plan, this is my last slide, but we've, before going out to acquire new resources, we wanted to know what the potential was for water conservation. We've had a strong program for 20 years. However, we did the exercise of a strategic plan and estimated Flagstaff's could still have a nice quality of life, but still reduce another 20 gallons per capita per day over the next 20 years. So targeting 80 GPCD at the time we were at 100. So we have a whole number of projects within the optimized conservation program that City Council adopted in, I think, 2020. And so we're still working towards that goal, and we're on track to meet that goal. And I'm just showing that at the time we presented the water conservation plan to City Council. If you look, one graph on the left shows if we just stopped and assumed no additional water conservation, and you can see the timing for an additional water supply with 80 GPCD rate move from about 2035 out to 2048. There are other reasons we may need additional water supply before then, but that's the impact that water conservation has. And we feel that 80 GPCD is a rate, it might be hard to drop below that without sacrificing kind of the community lifestyle, let's say, and how we use water. Cutting water in parks, let's say, and those sorts of sacrifices.
And Aaron, that 80 GPCD, that's total commercial, industrial, residential, and everything?
Yes,
that
it
we're
is.
shooting
It
for?
actually includes our non-revenue water. That's water that just leaks out of our pipes or is lost, which we're not billing for whatever reason, or we're flushing our system. When we have new developments come online, we have to flush the pipes. Yeah.
Do we have any idea if we got down to 80 GPCD, what we would be down to for residential GPCD?
We do.
What portion of that?
I don't have that number. But right now residential, I think it's 38 or 41 of our 90.
Okay.
And that's single family and multifamily.
Thank you.
Chair. NAU as a institution, do you know if they've maxed out on their capacity student-wise, or will there be additional water demands as the student population continues to increase?
I don't have a good answer for that right now. Yeah, I don't. I
That's
thought maybe-
okay, just something that popped into my head.
And if
I
that's
know they're
a-
one of the bigger users.
Yes, they are. And if that is some information you'd like, I'd be glad to reach out for comment from NEU.
Up to you, but thank you for the answer.
I know that NAU is building more residential stuff on campus for the next few years.
That concludes my intro to this talk, and now I'll turn it over to Brad unless there are more questions. Okay.
Mr. Chair, Water Commission, it's an honor and a privilege to be back and to be speaking in front of you again after several years. Again, just to provide a little background, I know Aaron had already done so, but again, like apparently a lot of us, we're getting older. We've been doing this job for a long time. I have been mostly working in the municipal industry, whether it's down in the valley or with Flagstaff. And this Aaron mentioned, I was started as the water resources manager, and then I retired as the director of water services. And when I did so, I ended up had some phone calls of people wanting me to help them, Flagstaff being one of them. And so I started to provide some managerial in some cases, but mostly technical water resources work, what I had done before with the city of Peoria and the city of Flagstaff. And again, also doing master plans over the last 4 years for several of the large valley cities. And similar to what I'm doing here with, took that knowledge and brought it forward to here with Flagstaff. And also Flagstaff has asked me, again, being around a while, helping them with Red Gap Branch. But this presentation is really a water resource planning presentation. So they hired me to implement what is resiliency and redundancy is what we have coined that. And I'll kind of talk more as we go through that. The purpose of that is to gauge what is the timing and if or when a new supply is needed by the city. And if there is a new supply needed by the city, what's its volume? Independent of what's its supply, what's the volume should that city be looking at? This is a very common thing that all of the valley cities or I should say Tucson, all of the large Arizona communities in the state are doing. What we call resiliency and redundancy is the introduction of into these graphs, into the analysis, the modeling, prolonged drought, or a term of what we call aridification. And what that really is just a fancy name for hotter and drier climate. So think of those two, all bounce back and forth between those two terms. The introduction of a catastrophic wildfire, because Flagstaff is unique in that 80% of its water supply comes from outside of its city limits and on national forest land. So it's a little different than when you're planning for down in the valley municipalities with Flagstaff. And then she also mentioned about Lake Mary Wellfield and the need of, she showed you some of those hydrographs and the need to possibly relax or decrease pumping to get some of those water levels to stabilize in the local aquifer adjacent to those well fields. So we're introducing a concept known as scenario planning. And I want to stop here just for a second and look at this graph, because it's important never to pick a single future because you'll be wrong. So so the benefit of doing a scenario planning is to help bracket the timing and when a new supply is needed. And when you're making these decisions, looking at the graph I put today, you want to make these decisions in the near term so they'll fit any plausible future or most likely future when you look farther out. So that's kind of where we're at with these decision points. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to leave you with some food for thought about what should you be doing in this near-term graph and what decisions you should be considering while doing so. This is a traditional way to do integrated master planning. And Flagstaff on this continuum to the left and to the over to the right is pretty much between step 1 and step 2. So we all know what the water supply options are, except for the new one that came up just very recently, and that's advanced water purification, the third bullet on the far left down. But otherwise, we kind of know what those are. And then we transition into, okay, now that we know what supply alternatives, what then doing some master planning to look at integrating economic analysis, financial analysis, and needs analysis. And that's what I'm presenting to you today. And then ultimately come forward to the community with a handful of portfolios to meet that long term. I'll get into it, the designation, because we did all that before any of this logic was put out there. And I'll talk about the portfolio that you've been seeing these graphs, one of the portfolio, and then eventually the community will make a decision. And I put out there in another 5 years or so in terms of the big picture decisions of which to go. So we'll have some time to do the economic and financial, et cetera. So there's 2 different approaches that cities do. Sorry, I got to take some water. There's 2 different approaches, and it's very important that we do both. When you're looking doing a needs analysis for a community, you do both. And they're a population-based, which is these graphs that I just showed you, but that's not the only one. You also tie it to existing land uses and then calculate what did the voters approved, what is already built environment, what's the unbuilt environment, tie a water supply to it, and that's your build out water needs. So we did both of those. Under the population here, we've capped the population at roughly 170. I think the graphs say 172,000. That is what the land use and the zoning in Flagstaff can take, according to the 2030 regional plan, taking the max zoning and the max land use. So that's why these graphs are run out to when do you get to 170,000 basically? And then the rate of getting there is there's 2. The 1.4% is the average over the last 4 decades of what Flagstaff has experienced. The 1.2 is what was mentioned earlier, is the Econa number of what they think. And I'll show you the difference of what those 2 look like comparative to each other. And then the resiliency and redundancy scenarios, I mentioned I did 1, and they're going to be comparative right next to each other. Aridification and the groundwater sustainability. The addition of what if there's a catastrophic wildfire in Woody Mountain and takes out a few of those wells. I didn't do all of the wells. We just looked at a few, but clearly you can do what scenarios you want. These were some that we picked in collaboration with city staff. And then the last one is, well, what if it doesn't permanently wipe out the well field, but you can it only burnt everything on top, and you can replumb, rewire electricity, et cetera, and get those wells back online in 5 years. So those are the scenarios on population growth that we're going to look at. The land use method, as I mentioned before, it combines existing water use and zoning and regional plan, and then calculates it the long term. Now, Flagstaff is recognized for this nationally 6 years ago by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. They're a national organization that governs or advocates for a variety of land policy. And they're starting to get into the water supply side and linking. And this is the front page of their quarterly magazine. I've circled in yellow the article. There were 2 communities that they highlighted, one in Colorado and Flagstaff, about how successful we've been at linking land use and water. If you're interested, I'm sure we can provide you, or the staff can get you a copy of that and read that article. Also has some other interesting things on the Colorado River in there as well. So here's the graph that Aaron started. And I'll get to the chair's questions. Of course, he's going to be the one to answer or ask them. So these were done 14 years ago, just as we were getting into, that's right as I was transitioning from the water resources manager to the water services director, kind of put that in perspective. And these numbers were based off of the designation and specifically the recovered reclaimed, as Aaron mentioned. So first, the designation was keep everything flat except for population. What are your water supplies that you have now that you think you can pledge and not increase? Those were just the assumptions that we worked with DW, Department of Water Resources, and did. So that answers your question of the flat line. The
Brad, excuse me just a minute.
Oh.
With regards to that flat line and other things, when we see a change in something that we used when we applied for our designation of adequacy, do we have to submit that change to ADWR?
Yeah, Chair, Water Commission members, that's a great question. The Flagstaff designation is a 20-year designation. The valley cities, on the other hand, are shorter. They grow much faster than Flagstaff does. So the department put them on a shorter leash. And all those cities, that's part of what I was helping 3 of the municipalities do over the last several years, is modify or update their designation application. So yes, all of these assumptions get re-looked at again. In Flagstaff's case, it'll be 20 years. We actually, and Aaron is continuing to do so, you kind of look at it every year as a city to make sure you're still tracking like you should.
So we will need to look at it in 20 years then
You
from the
will,
time of
so I believe it's
designation.
2033
Okay,
when formally you'll look at it. So before then, maybe in a few more years, you're going to start the modeling, you're going to start gearing back up to refresh some of the numbers at the bottom that you see here.
great, thanks.
And then the reason why there's 2 different browns, that was me. I wanted to show what was being mined versus what is sustainable, because there was at that time, everyone thought shouldn't say everybody, but there was some folks in the community that thought that any gallon of water we pump, we're mining. And that's not true. And so I attempted the recovered reclaimed as Aaron adequately answered. And then the net natural recharge, to be candid, that was from the vice chair's published report in yes, Mr. Bills. A report that he published, I took a conceptual water budget for the Coconino Plateau, shrunk it down to Flagstaff in terms of the recharge that was estimated, and then made some guesstimates and put in that number. So Aaron is absolutely right. Since 2011, 12, when these graphs were originated, we've done a lot more groundwater modeling. So we're a lot more sophisticated. And so we can update the total brown will be the same, the 9913. The element of what's renewable versus mining will shift. How's that? So hopefully that answered all of those questions. So, but the point here that I want to make sure everyone realizes that in this graph, this is a base case at 1.4% growth. And again, we use a 7-year average of gallons per capita per day, because you don't want to pick one, because it does bounce around. If you have a really hot summer, it goes up. So you always kind of try to average or smooth that number. By 2048 is when you need a new supply, independent of what. That's what with the assumptions that I put on this graph on the upper right. So the other one I didn't mention was interbasin. The department was not comfortable that the city pledged the water out of the interbasin, because it's not always available. It's a really small groundwater pool, groundwater aquifer up there, and the springs dry up. There are some wells, but it's a small. And then of course, Flagstaff's had 2 major fires, one in 2010, one in 2022, that eliminated that 0. So none of these include the interbasin. I always told our operations staff as director, the interbasin is kind of like, your gravy water. When it's there, use it, because it's the best quality water. It's the most renewable, and it's there, but it's not always there. And they can tell you that. I'm looking at the interim director now, as he was in that position for a long time. The important thing here is this is the 60,500 acre feet of a new water supply, because you're going to see that in several of these graphs. This is the one specifically that Aaron showed of 1.2%. All other assumptions are identical. You have to do that to make sure you're comparing apples to oranges. If you change too many knobs on the model, then you don't really know what you're looking. You don't really see the comparative sensitivity to those assumptions. And I'm going to go back and forth because I think it's important there's not a lot of difference of when a new water supply, meaning the analysis that comes out of it, whether it's 2048, it's 4 years later, 1.2% versus 1.4%. It's not really sensitive to that number of when. The important thing is you still need a new water supply. It's still 6,500. It just pushes the timing out a little bit. And then when you actually grow out to the total build out of the community. So here's where we get into the meat of what I was asked to do. Again, same assumptions on the graph, except for we introduced one other thing just for your benefit. The very bottom bar on this horizontal bar that's blue is roughly 1,927 acre feet. That number represents the median deliveries that we have used out of Lake Mary over a 74-year period. We thought that was a reasonable number to do the median, since half of the time it's higher, half of it's lower, and not use the average because we don't think you're going to use the average. So it's the median. I think that's an important one because in this scenario. So we took the median number, and what if it's a hotter and drier climate? And what if in 5 years you only use half of that median, and in 15 more years Lake Mary goes away? That doesn't mean it goes away permanently, but you can use it on any given year. The analysis I just said about interbasin, but for planning purposes, it's dry and now you got to start looking for something else. So we thought 15, 20-year horizon is reasonable to at least see what it looks like, see what it does. We can argue when that is, but I'll just be candid, the Valley Cities are looking at the aridification of the Colorado River Basin, and we've been working with them. And I know you mentioned, Commissioner Paul, you work for City of Gilbert. We're looking at those at less water in the Colorado River system. So if you take that and you move, or you take Lake Mary away as it becomes drier over a 20-year period, and you begin to address relaxation of pumping in the lower Lake Mary well field, and I just picked a 10-year average of what that well field has pumped. What this scenario does is it tells you, Flagstaff, you can barely withstand, you need a new water supply. You might be able to pump your wells more, meaning peak day. That's another subtlety here in these graphs. Aaron did say they were complicated. These are average annual numbers for those of you that like the geek and average annual versus peak day. You can always pump more, but over the whole year, this is what you need to pump. If you follow the difference between. So what this is telling me, and what I'm sharing with you, Flagstaff can't take long-term dry up of Lake Mary and losing and relaxing the Lake Mary well field by a 10-year average combined. You need a new water supply. Again, thinking about how resilient or redundant do you want Flagstaff's water supply? We can always go in and change these numbers, change the knobs on the model, but these were the ones that staff and all of us felt comfortable with showing you. So here's the second one. It's identical to the first one, except we had a wildfire to it, which is essentially, and I just picked Woody Mountain, and I only picked 3 wells. I didn't pick them all. So you could see what this would do if you take Lake Mary away, reduce Lake Mary well field, and then take 3 of the wells out of Woody Mountain. Same thing, all of those, and I did have that all occur at the same time. You could shift them around, but the answer is still going to be the same. Is Flagstaff one catastrophic wildfire away from challenges? The answer is yes. If you have a fire and Lake Mary goes away, and you continue to want to become more stable in your water supplies. So that's a very important. And then the timing, again, we can switch some of these around. They don't all occur on one year because obviously that wouldn't necessarily. And when I was director, I want to talk about this for a minute in terms of a wildfire. You may or may not remember 2019 in the museum fire, right? We all remember that. Stormwater reports to the Water Services Director. Absolutely remember. But do you remember what happened 2 days before that or 3 days? Yeah, you don't, do you? The Newman fire occurred 3 days before the museum fire. Where was I? I was out at the Newman fire because if you burn Upper Lake Mary watershed, we already know Denver already and the Front Range, they've already had those problems 10, 15 years ago when it burnt the Front Range watersheds for them. I was concerned that Lake Mary watershed was going to flame. And thankfully, the Forest Service did a wonderful job and mitigated the Newman fire, but no one was looking at the Newman fire. Everyone was looking at the, horrific damage on the stormwater side at Museum. So I just wanted to share that personal experience about where I was thinking early on when those two fires occurred, at least from a water supply side.
Brad,
Yes.
first of all, I want to say I really appreciate this report that you put together because it makes you think,
Yeah.
you know. And when I look at things like, 3 wells in the Woody Mountain well field and what we're seeing on the television every day that's going on in Los Angeles with the damage that's being done by the wildfires out there, uh, uh, in my mind, I'm thinking 3 wells, we're going to lose the whole well field. And I'm thinking that all the power is overhead.
It is. So
Out
that's
there.
so the next graph is, this assumption means you're never going to be able to rebuild it. And I thought after I did this, it's like, well, we're all pretty smart. You dump enough money into it. Yeah, all of the power lines are above, both in Lake Mary and in Woody Mountain, right? Pretty sure they are. So yeah, they all go away, and all the wellhead equipment, everything would burn. And thankfully, in the Newman fire, that's where the Lake Mary well field was or is. That was one of their primary points to protect. Don't let the Newman fire come over to that well field. They couldn't really do much about the watershed burning. That's what they tried to keep, but they had looked at the infrastructure, the city's infrastructure, the wells, and protected those. So those were never touched. Absolutely. And I meant to mention that, and thank you for bringing it up. What's going on? Hydrants going dry, the challenges that Los Angeles is having. No one ever thought you're going to have that kind of, let alone 2 gigantic fires that burn so much as they, the sadness that we've seen over there. That's, I think, why the city asked me to look at this stuff and then bring this stuff forward to decision makers to begin thinking, how redundant and how resilient do you want to be as a community in terms of water supply? We're working on the stormwater side, absolutely. Right, we're investing a lot of money on the stormwater side, but what about the water side? So one more piece of information on that, and that is the total volume of water. Now you're looking at, you take some of the groundwater away permanently. Now you're looking at upwards of 12,000 acre feet. You're going to need a new water supply. Again, depending on the timing, I made all this in 15, 20 years, but you're going to need a new water supply. So again, as I mentioned, I looked at that and went, oh, we could probably do something in 5 years. Again, no real reason I picked 5. I just figured APS, everyone would be scrambling. You come up with the dollars and you rebuild just those 3 wells or the water lines or the electric lines to all of them. And so what this shows, again, I had everything again occur just on one time, but we could shift it. You're going to need a short-term water supply of roughly 4,800 acre feet and a long-term water supply because of the taking Lake Mary away, the aridification of that watershed of about 9,800 acre feet. So I think that's the last of my population figures. So it's what these are, they're very sensitive to when you pick. And again, we can do the knobs, but I thought 15, 20 years out for a dry Lake Mary. And then I just superimpose what is the wildfire and or the relaxing of the well field. But all of these, I think the simple takeaway is all of these show the city needs a water supply. Just matters when and how much. So now I'm going to stop here and I'm going to totally shift gears. Okay, everyone's got a nod. I love it. So this is the land use. So this is some work again done quite a while ago, but the regional plan is what's still in place today. I believe the community is going through a regional plan. I've reviewed that regional plan, but we're not quite done with it. So the recommendation I have is once the community votes and approves it, you'll want to go back through and do this with whatever's approved in terms of the update. So on the far left, you have the demand and the utility billing data, single family, multifamily, et cetera. You have commercial, residential, et cetera. We came up with, for each of those, they attach the utility billing data to each of those polygon shapes, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. And then the units, so the gallons per house per day, gallons per acre per day, gallons per student per day. So that's what those are. So you summarize those based upon those unit demand categories in the billing data. And then you use GIS and you link all of that information. So what this map shows is the outline boundaries, or is the city of Flagstaff. The white is either built or it'll never be built, meaning it's Forest Service land, it's protected open space, that kind of thing. The colored lands, at least, excuse me, at least in 2011, this was all the unbuilt lands in 2011. And then based on that table I just showed you, we linked how much each of those are going to need. Link the gallons per day to each of those various land uses and or zoning categories. And then you come up with a terrible table like this, but I wanted to show this, and you have a copy of it, because I wanted to show the detailed analysis of land use based planning is. All of that GIS comes out into a table similar to this. So on the left side now we have land uses. Then you have the utility billing compared to that, the unit demand categories. And then you kind of march over, you have the residential demand, you have future dwelling units, and then on the far right's really what you're looking for. How much new water do you need attached to the colored polygons on that map? And that analysis in 2011 showed 9,100 acre feet at build out. This method, if you remember, I said, doesn't tell you when you need it, but whatever the voters approved, you take the water uses on similar land use categories today, add it to, or connect it to the land uses in the future. That's what it is. So that's one data point. Another one on land use. I did a scenario with that, worked with the city's GIS. It was a little more time intensive than what we had to do, but the easy one to update was single family residential. To link all those utility billing data, go through the customer categories again. It was too much for the time period we had, but it was easy enough to do single family. And that's okay because Flagstaff builds homes, kind of like most communities. It's the biggest demand category. So we updated it with 143. If you remember, it was 179 in 2011. Kudos to you and your conservation, at least on the residential piece. That's what it is today in terms of a gallons per house per day, not a person. Because we try to get away from GPCD sometimes, because that really is tied to how many people are in that house. And from a utility, you don't really care. You just care that's the house and what's the average of that house. And it's easy to count homes on GIS. So we went this way. It dropped the additional need down to 8,000 acre feet just by the conservation you've done since 2011.
Brad, is there any way that in my mind, at least from discussions that I've had with realtors and so forth, in my experience in the last year since I've moved back to Flagstaff, that we're taking into account the increasing number of second homes here? I was actually told by a couple of people that 40 to 50% of the homes here in Flagstaff are second homes.
So this 143 or the one before it would take into account we took, you know, not exactly sure of the 143 number of how the GIS took that utility billing data. If we eliminated the zeros and then we did then we did this average without this, but I would think if they came up on any given year and there was water use, yeah, it took that into account, which would actually make this number a little smaller than it should.
Yeah,
Right. I think that's where you're getting at.
it is.
Yeah. So, but it shows that, again, that's why we don't do one future because we know we'll be wrong. And here's the end, but I want to spend just a minute here. One thing that this summary shows, or several. The first is population method. You have 2 base cases and 3 of these resiliency numbers. Anywhere from all of these show Flagstaff needs a new water supply. Doesn't matter what method that's common use that I've just done with multiple urban valleys, cities. You need a new water supply with the land uses you have that are unbuilt today and are in private lands and the state lands that are willing to be converted to private. The next one is the land use based. Again, depending upon what density, the 2030 regional plan came up with multiple densities. So we did that analysis. So I picked the intermediate. That seems to be what Flagstaff was building at the time. So that's so it comes up with those volumes, and then again with the updating with the utility billing data drops it. So the median of all of those is 9,200 acre feet. You may ask, well, Brad, what do you pick? And I said, well, I don't think you should. You at a minimum want to pick 6,500 and at a maximum pick 12,000. So make some decisions that will meet either one of those. And then you can make that decision later when the hard numbers come, when the money comes, and the community needs to make decisions on numbers. Some other things, what this shows is, as Aaron mentioned, water conservation, you're still going to need a new supply. I ran the graph she showed, stopped it at about 2050. I ran the analysis all the way out to build out on the population, and that was roughly 3,600 acre feet, even with taking conservation down to 80 starting today. So I think that's important because I've heard many, many times, oh, we can conserve our way out of it. No, you can't. Not with the unbuilt land uses that are in private property today. If the community and the commission and council wants to incorporate resiliency and redundancy to a changing climate and a particular hotter and drier one and a response to catastrophic wildfire, then what this analysis is showing, you're going to need a new water supply sooner than what we're predicting in terms of if this community were to just continue to grow like you've always been doing. But I don't want to leave you with doom and gloom, right? That's no fun. And that's not what I'm here to do either. I want to give you a little bit of thing. And that is the compassion here. As I mentioned, I've done this exact analysis for soon to be 4 communities down in the valley. All of them are in a similar position. Everyone's scrambling because of the Colorado River is dropping. What do we do? So the analogy is like Mary. What do we do? Now, the unique thing with Flagstaff is the fire component and your infrastructure that's in the fire, that's out in the national forest. So that is a big something different that Flagstaff has to consider that the Valley cities haven't. And the last thing I will leave you with when you look at these numbers, I'm not saying what water supply you need. I'm not saying I gave you 5 or at that very second slide, the city has 5 of them. So if you look, is it advanced water purification? Is it Red Gap Ranch? That's for the community and your decisions a little farther down the road to show. What I'm here to tell you is you're not that resilient. And I can tell you the utility actually already knew this. We just had to put numbers to it. And so what are those, the next steps are going to be taking this analysis, some of the analysis I showed you that was done 10, 12 years ago, and kind of updating it. So with that, I intentionally didn't put summaries here and nor in my report. I just left it as a data analysis report and intentionally didn't put what does Brad Hill, former Water Services Director, think? You guys are the policymakers and city council is. So I'm leaving it at that. Thank you for the opportunity again to speak before you.
Thank you, Brad. Do we have any questions from the commission?
Yes. So the immediate problem we usually have is the peak summer water use. Do you know what percentage that is of the total? I mean, how much? 20, 30% higher in the summer, 50% higher? What do you? Oh, double?
It's approximately double. In the winter, we're approximately 6 million gallons per day consumption, and in the summer, we're up near 11 or 11 and a half.
And what is the cause of that? What is the users that are causing that additional use?
My opinion is that it's outdoor use, people watering gardens and lawns, and also we have a seasonal community that comes up here in the summer.
So the question is, have you taken into account what would happen if we really got hardcore on outdoor watering? Essentially water that doesn't return to the system. And we try to get rid of that water that doesn't return to the system as much as possible. What kind of a scenario can you make out of that? And I say that with regard to direct potable reuse, indirect potable reuse, and how that affects the picture, especially if you do your recharge over the local fields in the city.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Nauman, I actually looked at that the other day because I've been away from it for a while, and I believe we return 80% of the water into into this wastewater system. Then there's loss in that too. So you don't get 80% back, right? There's some, which is really high compared to the valley cities because they use a lot of their water outside, not that you care. But I was shocked when I read that number. Is the reason why when I calculated that number, I believe 20% is what is used outside of all of the, if you look at it in annual aggregate, roughly. Is that kind of where? Yep. Yeah, and so what Aaron was mentioning is, so if the objective is to continue down the path of more additional conservation, that number's kind of go down as well. So you won't, kind of cuts both ways. If you're looking at advanced water treatment as a water, or purification as a water supply, you get less. Good.
Any more questions? Brad?
I'm sorry. Yeah, hold on. I apologize. Aaron, do you want to introduce him? So, sorry, Kevin.
We do have one more slide, but did you have a question for Brad?
I was just going to ask a question with regards to, I don't recall that we ever looked that closely at fireproofing any of our well fields and the cost. I would imagine the major cost would obviously be having to do with the power lines and getting them buried, going to the various wells. But it does, we have underground pipes going from all those wells, and it doesn't seem to, although it might be expensive, it doesn't seem like it would be, out of the question to consider in trying to do something like that, especially with the threats that we have of wildfires around here.
Yes, we did. We do have a line item in our capital program to bury the Woody Mountain water line. In fact, we've included that in some requests for grant funds. So it's up to Mac, our engineering section director and lead, to see that capital program realized. And there have been a lot of efforts by our local watershed protection folks, our wild and fire folks, to protect our well field and the well sites with thinning work and such.
That's good to hear, because the first time a catastrophe would happen, that's the first thing somebody's going to ask is, well, why didn't we look at trying to protect, our well field from something like that? Because it can be done. Thanks. Haley?
Sorry, now I have a question, and this may or may not be relevant to the conversation, but I was curious if for the natural recharge part, like, is there anything there in terms of forest health and forest management? And I know it's not a direct tie, but just wanted to flag that the natural recharge component, water resiliency, landscape health, just anything, any there.
Yes, Haley, or Chairman Paul. So we have a number of watershed projects where we're looking at recharge rates. One is with Abe Springer at NAU. We actually got a WIFA grant through the Water Conservation Program to keep funding his students to look at recharge rates within the Lake Mary watersheds. We have working with our stormwater section, trying to find sort of areas within the Flagstaff area, even though we're urban, there might be areas where we can focus stormwater recharge and reclaimed water for the benefit of the aquifer. And there are some new studies, actually, Abe Springer, some of his work in the Hart Prairie area that might help us with recharge rates in the watershed in the non-urban area, where we can update, the work of the USGS to come up with a better estimate of recharge, spatially related to geology type and such. So, mhm.
Don?
Thank you. Couple of questions, and I'm not really sure if Brad or Aaron would be the best to answer these. First of all, I have a vested interest in what's going on out in the LA area right now. I have family living out there and not very far away from where the main fires are. But in any case, if you've been following the news, you hear a lot, you hear the term defensible space used a lot. And it's something I first learned about as a fire prevention officer with the California Department of Forestry when I was going to college. And one of the reasons that contributes to the LA area fires being so catastrophic is there was practically no defensible space in and around any of those urban areas. So you have a wildfire that starts on undeveloped land or in the forest, gets pretty big pretty fast because of the Santa Ana winds, and it's putting off embers like crazy. These embers are jumping into the community, and that's the reason the communities are burning up, is because, there's no defensible space around them. So one comment is that, I think it's a big wake-up call for the city of Flagstaff in terms of things that they could be doing, not only related to creating defensible space around public infrastructure and buildings, but also as part of some kind of uh, conservation program, encouraging the rest of the community to be responsible in that regard as well. The other question I have goes back to something I think that Aaron was talking about earlier, related to the impacts of wildfires, and that has to do with recharge and runoff water quality. Uh, I think one of the things that you also need to consider is the volume of water that runs off a burned area. In a lot of cases, if the fire is hot enough, it basically bakes the soil into concrete, what's called hydrophobic soils, and you end up generating a lot more water runoff, as well as debris flows, mud flows, what have you, from those areas than you would otherwise. So you not only have all of the debris that's coming off of those burn areas, you have the increase in water runoff that you have to deal with as well, and the Schultz drainage is a really good example of that.
Yes, and
Yeah. No, if you don't mind, I do have just a quick comment. So one of the things that happened after the Newman fire and the hydrophobicity, I believe is the term. Sorry, that's a little tongue twister. Was all the turbidity that comes into the lake, and I have done some work with the city, and What we found is, and I called, so I had some contacts in the Denver area, and I said, what did you guys do? Because basically it's gonna choke Upper Lake Mary, and then the water treatment plant can't take and cannot treat that water. The turbidity gets way too strong. So what they ended up doing is they created all these ponds, and all these ponds between here would be between Lake Mary and the treatment plant. You could be physically anywhere, but hydraulically between the two, and you'd have to settle all that turbidity out, and it would be at a whole new treatment process that the standard water treatment doesn't deal with well. Our treatment plant doesn't deal well with it at all. So that would be it took them several years to finance, design, and construct if there was truly a catastrophic wildfire in the Upper Lake Mary Bay watershed.
It seems like the city of Flagstaff has in fact done that in response to the Upper Rio de Flag and the Schultz Creek area. They built some retention basins that are, in my mind, designed to, let some of that sediment settle out and let some of the water pass through. But it's still, an increased volume of water that has to be dealt with.
So for those of us that have been here long enough, in 2012, after the Schultz fire, there was the Flagstaff protection, I forget the exact term, where they went up and they did so. The city paid to thin some areas on the Forest Service, never been done before. There were 2 watersheds to do that to. The Forest Service, not them, but the collective group only got to the Schultz Creek watershed, never got to Mormon Mountain. That was in the bond election to do both. The city voted to do both, but all the money got sucked up and went over here. Not saying that's good or bad, but into the Dry Lake Hills area. So Mormon Mountain is still sitting there ready. It's still floating.
Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, but somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, to your comment on defensible space, I was just talking to Neil Chapman. He's our Wildland Fire Program Manager, and about defensible space. And I know, I believe our city council will be getting a briefing on a lot of the topics you touched on and what applies to Flagstaff and where we're at.
Just a comment. I mean, I have a friend who lives up on the Canadian border, and they've had fires there. And when they have a relatively reasonably cold fire that doesn't burn the soil or melt down the soil, so you've got hydrophobicity, they've actually seen after the fire, and it just wipes out the whole forest in the area, and in that area, springs come back. So, and I've heard this anecdotally in several places in the West. Not an expert on this, but it seems like even after we thin, we leave a fairly high density of trees in the area. And that's really not the best. If you want a good landscape for a aquifer, that's, to generate more water getting into the aquifer, that's not the best situation. I don't know if the Forest Service and the city and folks have looked at that possibility of looking really hard at watersheds and how we're going to have to manage them as we continue to get drier and drier and drier. Ponderosa pine forest is not the best stuff to collect water. So,
Thank you. Another question. I just noticed your next steps slide, and a couple of those items seem like we're kind of like going back in time a little bit by initiating a Bureau Reclamation appraisal study. We had done one of those, I believe, or another group had done one of those, I believe, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, for the Coconino Plateau to evaluate or to determine what the unmet demand for water would be, including for the city of Flagstaff, and coming up with some potential alternatives to meet that unmet demand. So I was just wondering, and maybe Brad, you can address this, because I think, wasn't Kevin Black helping you with this as well? Well, Brad or Aaron, but in any case, I'm wondering if that old study was pulled off the shelf and looked at.
So I can address that, Commissioner Bills. The old study, the one I believe you're referring to is the North Central Arizona Water Supply Project, something like that, the North Central Arizona, the Western Navajo Pipeline. That appraisal study was through the Coconino Plateau Watershed Partnership, or at least that was the vessel for the Bureau of Reclamation to conduct the work. And they looked at, 100 water demands in the area and any unmet demands, mostly, tribal demands, City of Flagstaff, Williams, the Grand Canyon. And that appraisal study did then identify, potential water resources, the Colorado River, and that did progress to the Senator Kyle time period when the last settlement was almost reached, the tribal settlement that would have then provided the paper water to deliver water through the Western Navajo pipeline to all the partners. The city participated in that. We funded, we didn't get too far because after the settlement didn't occur, then no one had water rights to the Colorado River. So Plan B, now we're on to Plan B, I would say. Red Gap Ranch was mentioned. Is there groundwater alternatives? This appraisal study that we've requested to work with the Bureau of Reclamation on is focused on the city of Flagstaff's water demands. And they will look at all of our available water resources and optimizing those available water resources. So we do have additional reclaimed water we can do something with. And they will look at water demands like what Brad presented, all the different scenarios. And they want the appraisal study to incorporate potential partners when you can partner together to solve water problems. That's the Bureau's bread and butter, from what I understand. They don't mind helping a community, but they really want to see regional collaboration. So we have asked the Navajo and Hopi to participate in our appraisal study. We have retained Kevin Black. He worked for the Bureau of Reclamation, I think, like 20 years. Now that he's retired, he wants to help communities like ours, and we're just thrilled to have his guidance. He does not work for the Bureau of Reclamation, but he is a resource for us. He knows all the players. So this appraisal study is different than the first one, but they do build on previous work done. So we have looked at that other appraisal study that you're referring to. There are other stakeholders, ADWR, state land, maybe the county, looking at our regional resiliency and how we can optimize water resources for long-term sustainability of the resources and just community protection. We do have Kevin. He is online. I don't think we need to introduce Kevin tonight. Oh, there he is. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself? And if you would like to add anything to what I've stated, please do.
Now, Chairman Doba and Vice Chair Bills, new and continuing members of the commission, greetings. I had the privilege of working with several of you through the years. And so I won't add a lot here in the interest of time, but I think your familiarity with the Bureau of Reclamation's appraisal investigation process will be extremely helpful. And there are many investigations that would be referenced in this forthcoming or this next step, many of which you're familiar with. And so we are awaiting the Bureau's response to engage formally. We have been informed that they intend to do that. The city of Flagstaff has been insisting on a response from them here of late. We've spoken with them a few times. And so we're ready to engage. The stakeholders and the regional partners have been as a part of this outreach, they've been informed as well. And so you can expect here in the future to have Bureau of Reclamation hopefully attending and presenting and discussing the scoping process for an appraisal investigation. So good to see you all. I know you have a lot on your agenda to complete tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all again.
Well, Aaron and Kevin, thank you both for that additional context to the next steps.
Aaron, does that complete that
It does.
item? Thank you very much. Appreciate all the work that's gone into this effort. With that being the case, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is old business. And this has to do with the reclaimed water rate discussion. And Aaron, I think you're back up on that one too.
I am back up for this one as well. So for many of you, this is a brand new topic. I can't imagine you were following this before you came online. We just went through a rate study. It was a wastewater, reclaimed water, water rate cost of service analysis, and council ultimately, after like 12-month, solid 12-month effort, adopted water and wastewater rates effective September 1st, 2024. It was a 5-year increase. And reclaimed water rates, the current policy is reclaimed water rates are a percentage of potable. And the percentage of potable was changed in, I think, 2016. It went up a couple percentages, but this council, basically, it was a lot to try to determine whether to change reclaimed water rates policy. This is back in like May this year. Do we change it and why? And they said, can we have a separate discussion on this topic? And they wanted us to bring it forward to the Water Commission. We have a policy. Why would we deviate from it? Realizing that could really suck up a lot of time of the rate study. And the main thing was getting our water and wastewater rates updated. So because the reclaimed water rates follow this percentage of the potable rate, when potable rates were adopted, reclaim followed the water rate. So the increase was 8.5% per year on potable. It's 8.5% on reclaimed water, and then that trickles down to the customer classes that we have in reclaimed water. So I'll share that. The Water Commission worked for about 5 months. Several of your commissioners were on a work group. The work group includes several folks that are in the audience right now. Snow Bowl was on the work group, Aspen Valley Golf Course, Continental participated, our city Parks and Recreation program. I always forget someone. NAU, that's a big one. NAU is on it. City staff facilitated by providing information, and Councilmember Sweet, now Vice Mayor Sweet, spearheaded as a council liaison to provide that city council perspective. The culmination of that effort was presented last month. It's a guidance document for considering a new basis for reclaimed water rate setting. The unique thing about reclaimed water rates is they can be set at the discretion of a governing body, unlike water and wastewater rates that have to be tied to a cost of service, or we can be challenged by customers if they feel that their rates are not equitable. Reclaimed rates can be set at the discretion of the governing body. So that's a pretty big deal. So tonight's agenda is bringing back the guidance document, but as the package that would be presented to City Council. We're on a City Council agenda for February 18th, I believe. It should be a Tuesday. I believe that's the correct date. We would like your feedback on this draft presentation. What information, is there anything in here that's just too much information or something we could add to provide City Council with the history of reclaimed rates and what their options are, and then this recommendation on how to proceed from the Water Commission, a recommendation on Um, you know, right now we're 35% of potable for the majority of the rates, and I'll go into this, but should we be basing rates on something that isn't arbitrary? And the ultimate recommendation was yes. You can base, we feel, and actually the work group should make the statement. I've quoted it at the end, but they feel a cost of service based rate and rate structure is more equitable, and the recommendation from this work group is City Council should consider moving to that. We do have some public comment on this. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you'd like to hear that public comment ahead of my talk or after my talk. We typically try to wrap up at 6. I'm thinking this might take us a little bit back past 6 p.m.
Why don't you go ahead and complete your talk, and then we'll have the public
I'll
comment.
do my
from the public.
best to not be long. So here's our agenda tonight, a bunch of questions. I did update this presentation after receiving some feedback from a work group member who felt some aspects were missing. So what you have in front of you is the updated version that I just made today. And what I'm presenting is that updated version. If you looked at what was sent out a couple days ago, you'll find some new slides. This has a lot of information on it, but what is reclaimed water? And I think you all actually know what reclaimed water is because you've worked in water. But the water uses are designated in state code rules under ADEQ. There are different water classes. Flagstaff has been, we committed to A+ in 2006, I believe, when Wildcat Hill was updated, the infrastructure was updated, but actually I believe all of our users can just take Class A, but we have to deliver Class A+ by our permit with ADEQ. And I just put some uses of Class A and B on here just for fun. Reclaimed water policy, as I said, the rate setting is unique. Our existing policy is in a document that was adopted by City Council in 2014, the Principles of Sound Water Management, the Water Policies chapter, and we've pasted in what the policy is. We have a goal, a minimum of full cost recovery. We do feel we meet that, and we have for several years since we established a standalone reclaimed water fund. Water utility, our utility has 4 funds. We have water, wastewater, stormwater, and reclaimed water. An example of existing policy is our revenues from rates, $800,000 a year, our expenses, $600,000 for operations. We throw $200,000 into whatever CIP we want to accomplish to meet the revenues. And here, since 15-16, each utility fund stands financially independent for the most part, but the policy does not address how rates are set or define a rate structure. The rate structure is the same as potable. Again, the new adopted rates, 8.5% per year for 5 years. And I have here what those reclaimed water rates are for your reference. But if you look at the potable water rates, the rate structure is basically the same, I think, except for off-peak golf courses. And the percentage of potable I provide on the right. A lot of times we say it's 35% of potable. That's true in almost all cases, with some exceptions. Golf courses are 87% of potable. Off-peak golf course. And then we have some 75% of potable. I provided just what are our reclaimed water rates in Flagstaff compared to other utilities in the newer presentation. This is in dollars per acre foot of water. The Flagstaff number, we actually, because we have some of our rates are actually tiers, and we have a lot of variability in our rates. This is like maybe an average number because our range in our dollars per acre foot, you'll see on the next slide, these are from 2019, by the way. Our range, you'll see Flagstaff is $443 per acre foot, all the way up to $1,500 per acre foot. But just for reference, I thought this might be helpful for council, unless you feel it's too much information. And we could get updated data as well. Some facts about reclaimed water. The Gulf industry has driven the use of reclaimed water in the Southwest just because they are desperate for water. And reclaimed water back then, it was like, couldn't give it away. It was like the gross water. But now we're so much more sophisticated. We understand science of water treatment and such that it's a valuable resource. But continental, and I use that term loosely, I think the name of the user back then was, I can't remember. Okay, 1966. That was just off the water from Wildcat Hill, and in the mid 90s, the Rio de Flag water reclamation plant was built in the middle of Flagstaff near the Sam's Club, is where it's located, and that was constructed purely to take large potable irrigation users off potable and put them on reclaimed water. That facility diverted 2,000 acre feet a year out of our potable system for reclaim. So that was a huge water conservation achievement at that time and still is. And the system I just mentioned was designed to serve large users. There are some low volume residential customers. If they're really close to the reclaim line, they're allowed to connect. But some people say, well, why don't you build more reclaim, put more purple pipe to Cheshire and let those people use it? It's expensive to add another water line. And we also don't have capacity with our current users to really expand in the summer months. So we would rather focus on just let's be as efficient as we can with all water resources, reclaim potable, maybe reducing the amount of turf we have. Reclaimed water delivery to reuse and discharge to the Rio de Flag. So the volume discharge, this is annual, is a large volume discharged, 4,000 acre feet a year. This is up through 2019. This has not changed very much. That 4,000 acre feet is what's available for expanded reuse. Again, we don't have that water in the summer, our peak day demands, but annually we can recharge that to the aquifer where it matters. Maybe we drink it now that the ADEQ rules are about to allow that as a permitted option. The delivered volume is pretty consistent at about 2,000 acre feet a year. Then we provided here just where's that water going. You can see the green ramping up to our golf courses and then the different shades of blue to the other pools. The gray in January and December is largely not 100%, but water for snowmaking. And then here's our reclaimed water lines. So this is the main trunk line. It's kind of in the shape of a C. It's not 100% tied together. We would like from an operational standpoint to tie the whole thing together. It just is better for disinfecting the system so we don't get hot spots, then we need to flush. Or some users might not get the benefit of all the disinfection that they should be, maybe. Not saying that's a problem, but this is our utility system. Some like Pine Canyon and Snowbowl, they take water from a meter in town, and then they're responsible for paying that infrastructure maintenance costs and construction. The roadmap, the timeline of this discussion on April 2nd, 2024 is when council gave staff direction to go through this exercise of do we deviate from the current policy? I think I've touched on these items already. Reclaimed water trends. The chairman and commission said, what might we do with this water? Why would we change policy? Are there new demands for this water? And the major modification to the reclaimed water code by the state, it's been, those classes forever now, decades, but they're adding this advanced water purification, which is a pipe to pipe reclaimed water. Start with wastewater, you treat it, reclaimed water, you then purify it to drinking water and put it directly into your distribution system. That's direct potable reuse. We can also use it indirectly It's already permitted by state for us to recharge and recover without any additional treatment to that A plus that we're making today. We should have a aquifer recharge permit, just haven't achieved it yet.
Aaron,
Yes,
if that excess, I shouldn't say excess, but the water that's not being utilized during part of the year were redirected to Upper Lake Mary, that would be an indirect use, correct?
that would be. And Carollo, and I think 2018, we had them look at an alternative analysis. What are all of our available other resources to maybe offset Red Gap Ranch? That was one of those. And so we have that 2018 report where Carollo provided just a engineering class level 5 cost estimate to pipe the water to Upper Lake Mary and do all these other alternatives. So
And that would also offset some of the aridification discussion that we had earlier.
yes, there are benefits for keeping the lake full. There would need to be some treatment for us to retain the current, recreational uses at the lake. We couldn't put the A plus in. We would have to do some additional treatment. If you think of Tempe Town Lake, I think that's A plus. Or, and in order for there to be bodily contact, they have to do some disinfection at the lake and get 2 weeks of no E. coli or something, or I don't know. They have to, before they'll let people have like a kayaking event or a water skiing event.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, AWP could be in our future, but so could a lot of different options for the available reclaimed water we have. Here are the dates the work group met, the participants, and the recommendation is I should have put this in quotes because it's right out of the guidance document, to implement cost-based reclaimed water pricing to replace the present 35% of potable pricing approach. And why, just 2 bullet points, but it's a whole guidance document of bullet points, why they recommended that. And another important conclusion is they really deliberated, do we try to implement this sooner than later? The recommendation is not necessarily to change this within the next 5 years, but let's address it at the next water rate study. Currently, that's timed for next January. Reclaimed water kind of ties with potable water because it offsets the potable demand. And when we do that next rate study is when we might make changes if council elects to at that time. And that concludes this presentation. I've added our 5-year plan. Rick Tatter provided the work group at the end of the slides, just in case you want to see what the 5-year outlook is for our revenues and the different parts of our budget. That was an important piece to the work group, so added that in for you.
Thanks, Aaron. Questions for Aaron? We will, yes. Aaron, just to make sure, I'm sorry, Karen.
Did you want comment on the slides that you're, anything about the slides?
Yeah, we're willing. I would love your feedback on this tonight. You can also provide me feedback through Marion. Just if you would rather send us an email, but happy to take public comment on the record tonight.
It's just,
Or I'm sorry, your comment.
it's actually something pretty simple, I think.
Okay.
You mentioned at some point the data for one of the graphs was through 2019, and you said the trend hasn't changed. So if you have more recent information than 2019, I think that probably would be appreciated.
Yeah. Good recommendation.
Aaron, to make sure I'm understanding this report, from what the committee came up with that was reviewing this, basically the recommendation is to stay with the percentage of potable rates until we have our next rate study done, and then look at the cost of service analysis for reclaimed water and how that would impact the rates. Is that correct?
That is correct. Council would elect to change the policy.
Right, okay, thank you.
That's how I understand it, but I would like to give credit to the three commissioners here, two commissioners now, who have been on the work group and asking whether I've covered everything adequately if they feel that I have.
Um, Yes, thank you, Aaron. Um, I guess I'm disappointed with one element, and that is that I think a lot of effort, in essence, 2 out of the 3 meetings went into writing the executive summary. And I think giving visibility to that would be, direct visibility to that for the council would be excellent, because there are a number of points in there that are not covered in the PowerPoint. Things like the burden on the council to get involved in the allocations, which is vital to the fairness concept. Um, the comments about conservation that we believe should begin immediately, basically extending the current water services conservation program to add in to the renewable area, excuse me, the reclaimed area, and use as a model some of the programs that have been used in the valley. Let's see, there are a number of other items there, but and I think going through the goals would be quite important. Providing simple, transparent logic, provide ongoing funding on the understanding that the current rates do not cover the full capital program for reclaimed water. I think they need to understand that. Um, um, Yeah, and providing the mechanisms to incentivize conservation. We mentioned both the potential for additional tiered rates and seasonal rates. So there's, I think, some richness in that one-page executive summary that could be or should be either added here or just shown explicitly as that one-page document. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Aaron? Before we open it up for public comment?
I just wanted to agree with Rob that I read through the 3-page document, and I thought it was excellent. And so you guys did great work on it. And I think the slideshow didn't completely reflect all the work in it also. So.
Rob?
I think there's one other thing that we haven't quite faced up to yet. The title on this document is called a discussion. In our executive summary, we call these recommendations, and the term guidance document has been used as well. I think we have to face up to, are we going to the council to make recommendations for them to either vote for or against? Or is this simply a discussion and hopefully you remember it in 5 years? Or, and then there's the issue of policy C1.1 in the, what's the right title? Master utilization.
Our water policies.
Water policies and so forth. So if the cost of service approach were adopted, it would require a change to policy C1.1. So I'm coming back to, is this just a nice discussion we're going to have and then kind of forget about it for 5 years? Or is this something we, put into writing and adopt, with the explicit statement that this will become the new baseline assumption for the next rate study. And this is the basis on which the customers can plan and you water services can plan. So discussion, friendly discussion, or is it recommendations to be decided upon?
So that I'm staff and I look to leadership. So Councilmember Sweet, sorry, Vice Mayor, gosh, and Shannon Anderson for our leadership team to determine how to present this to City Council. They asked for staff to do this exercise, so I feel I can't answer that necessarily, or I'm not comfortable really taking a stab at that. Unless you would like to.
I'll just expand on that. I'm not quite sure. I'm guessing that between now and when this comes to council, we will have Deputy City Manager Anderson and myself and maybe some staff talk about that because I'm maybe unclear. Shannon, if you have something to add.
I think that's a good direction, just to maybe expand a little bit further for the commission members. We meet on a weekly basis, talk about our upcoming council agendas. And so we work to plan topics to where it's not too much for one evening, but it's also meeting any other timelines that we need to keep in mind. So agree with Vice Mayor Sweet that we'll get together, we'll have those conversations. And then certainly we'll work with Aaron and the group to make sure that as commissioners, you know when that date's going to be. So if you'd like to attend or you wish to make public comment, that you have the opportunity to do so. I hope that answers your question, but certainly if there was another component that you wanted us to touch on, please let me know.
Well, excuse me. I guess that speaks to it that you can have the conversations offline, and I think that's important. But I think it comes down to, are we making, does this take the status of a recommendation to be decided upon? Or is this just, as the title here says, just a discussion? And if it's just a discussion, how does it have any lasting significance?
I think that's up to council to determine. So what I would present, like as I think of it right now, is you did make a recommendation, and that is to move to a different cost basis. And then council will have the guidance document. They'll read through all the important points backing that recommendation. What if we do integrate those talking points into the presentation? I can see why you're recommending that, so that it's vocalized during the council meeting. But what council does with that, I feel that that decision, they'll determine how they want to integrate that, whether it's making a policy change now, whether it's making sure next year that we integrate. Yeah.
Aaron, I'm looking at the staff report that came out with the agenda, and it indicates that the staff is seeking, any final edits from the commission and endorsement of the draft document.
Yes, thank you.
So is that what we're after for tonight, is for the commission to endorse the draft document?
Yes.
Mainly?
Thank you for
Okay.
revisiting the.
Okay.
Is the draft document the PowerPoint, or is the draft document the?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, I'm thinking the draft document is the document itself that came from the group.
Yes,
Okay,
that is
okay.
correct. And then any comments on the PowerPoint?
Okay.
Okay, well, at least for my part, I'll just leave it then. Then I think my comment on the PowerPoint would be that it needs to go on to a greater degree than it does now, incorporate all the elements of the executive summary.
Let's move on to the public comment at this time. Do we have some members of the public that would like to comment on this? Marion, do you have any cards or anything like that?
Yes, we have Ward Davis, the first to comment.
Ward?
So I'll just introduce myself as a resident of the city, Ward Davis, for 20 years and a former member of the Water Commission. And I've worked on the reclaim for years and trying to figure it out and try to figure out the policy. And it was confusing, and I think it still is. But I discovered something that I hadn't seen before, and that is there's a big fairness issue. We're always trying to balance the money for running the wastewater treatment plants, the water recovery reclamation plants. So right now, a little bit of money from reclaim goes to pay for that. The public pays most of it. It's 85% and maybe more. I mean, there's only a small portion that's charged against reclaimed. So that plant makes the water that the reclaimed people use. It cleans up the water, but it's making the water, and we're paying all that price. The fairness issue is how much should that be? And, you know, there's a little of it that was included so that they could get a logical basis for 35%. And now there's a question of what should it be? How can you do a cost of service study when that is going to be how much of the wastewater treatment plant should you be paying for as a reclaimed user? So that just leads me back to the, the percent of potable. Everything, that water is sometimes going to be used for aquifer recharge. It always has a reference to potable, and you can't separate it, and you don't gain anything by saying you're going to do a cost of service because you don't know what the cost of service is, because you have to decide on how much of the water reclamation plants you're going to get. So it doesn't work. But all you can say is it looks in all indications that it's going to have to go up. And if you ask for a little more for the users to pay a little more, they're going to be paying for the wastewater treatment plant. You saw on that on the chart that some people are charging much, much more than we are. That's because logically, you would raise reclaimed eventually to the point where it would still be desirable to use it instead of potable. So if it was at 70%, you'd have to spend a lot of money to say, look, I know that stuff's not very good, but I'm not going to spend an extra 30, 40% to switch to potable water. You don't want them to do that, and a 70% price would keep them from doing that. The point is that as you make it fair by letting the reclaimed users pay for the wastewater treatment plant, the price is going to go up. And when you say cost of service analysis, that's, it's really a question of how much are you going to pay? Any questions?
Questions for Ward? Thank you, Ward. We have another speaker.
Yes, we have Nicole Elman.
Nicole?
Thank you, new chair. Welcome to your position, and Interim Director Williams and Vice Mayor Sweet. My name is Nicole Elman. I'm here representing Aspen Valley Golf Club. It's nice to see some familiar faces on the commission and from the working groups, and some brand new eager faces. It was a great honor to be a part of the working group, and a wonderful privilege. It was a great educational experience. So I'm very grateful for the hard work that staff put in, and just for being involved and continue to have that involvement in this discussion. We do, Aspen Valley does support the cost basis study. We understand how valuable this water is to the community, be it potable or reclaimed. And we're very excited to be a part of that end user. So we do support that rate study because without that infrastructure to get that reclaimed water to the golf course, we wouldn't have a golf course. I would like to acknowledge that Continental Country Club is here today. We are business partners in our maintenance company, so we are tied together, and it is a mutual benefit to both of these courses that this reclaimed water rate is well thought out. It's justified, it's not arbitrary, it's supportable, defensible, and that's pretty much it. So thank you all for your time today.
Any questions for Nicole? Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Do we have another speaker?
That's all for public comment.
That's all. Thank you. Okay, with that in mind, going back to the issue at hand, and the fact that the staff is seeking an endorsement of the draft guidance document. Do we have discussion by the commission? I think this is an item that we will need a motion on.
I would move the Water Commission accept this document and move forward on it.
Motion's been, the written document. Motion's been made to endorse the draft guidance document that was developed by some of our fellow commission members here. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Do we have any opposed? None opposed. With that, the draft guidance document is endorsed by the Water Commission.
Just like to make one comment. I still haven't seen specific numbers for the reclaimed water budget and how that money is actually spent on an annual basis. It'd be nice over the next 2 months or so to get an actual spreadsheet layout of how that money has been spent so we know where we're going.
Vice Chair Nauman, I can provide you with that.
I also had a question before we get off of this topic. There was a slide in the handout that provided the expenses, the operations for reclaimed water. I think it was this slide. It said $600,000. Is that for just pumping costs?
You know, that is just an example of how our budget is aligned to meet revenues. That's just an example.
Okay.
But the fund does bring in about $1 million a year. And the slides I provided at the end, the 5-year plan does provide some of the revenues and where our expense items are. But we'll provide additional information.
Because we would be incurring significant costs even if we didn't have a reclaimed water system, just to treat the water to a level that we could discharge it.
Yeah, and that's the argument, is we have to treat it anyway. However, now that it's water. Water is water. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
May I make a comment as a member of the working group on this? I'd like to take advantage of the presence of Vice Mayor Sweet to emphasize one element that I don't think has been spoken of enough publicly or in this kind of a forum. And that's the comment that the council will have a role here. If the council does choose to go forward with cost of service pricing, it actually assumes the council has a major role in either making or at least reviewing the allocations that go into that cost study. And I say that in this sense. Through the recent years, I've heard council members say everything from none of the cost of the wastewater treatment plant should be allocated to reclaimed water. In other words, just from the discharge pump to the reclaimed water system downstream, that would be the appropriate, those would be the appropriate cost to allocate to reclaimed water. To people on the other end of the spectrum who would say, well, it's roughly 30% of the output of the wastewater treatment plant, therefore they should cover 30% of the costs of the wastewater treatment plant. And somewhere either on those ends or in between that is where the whole fairness question stands. And that's what the criticism has been through, at least since 2015, when I first tuned into this issue. And as the elected representatives, that's the crux of the decision here. Which of those costs should be allocated to reclaimed water? And then whatever consultant you hire can turn the crank and run the numbers and figure that out. But there's a huge role here for the council in solving the fairness question that has always kind of plagued this topic.
Thank you for your comment. And I will just say that Aaron and I kind of started this discussion because I felt that this is a very big topic. And I wanted to get council ahead of it and have an understanding of what we're even talking about. So that's why we formed the group and we're having the discussion now because it's not an easy one.
Thank you. Okay, I guess it's getting that time. We're down to item 7, informational items to and from the chair, commission members or staff. Let's just go around the commission first. Don, do you have anything? No? Haley? John? You're good. Matthew? I'll pass. And Robert?
Yes, yeah, 2 items I'd like to bring up. I would love it if we could, to the consultant, or excuse me, to the project list that we receive, I would love it if we could have all of the consultant studies. We hear through time of various consultant studies that are going on, and at least speaking for myself, I don't have a good sense of the full scope of the studies and whether we're doing enough to encompass all the topics before us, or we're redundant, or what. But anyway, I would love to see the full list of consultant studies on the project list. Second, as a future agenda item, I would love, in light of what we're seeing happen in California, I know we're not entirely analogous to that situation, but I think it would be prudent for us to ask for a presentation, perhaps combined by the appropriate fire people and water services people. Maybe one of the most direct questions is, in the worst conceivable fire, can we feed the hydrants that we've got? That's a question that keeps coming up in terms of California. And I have no sense personally, can we, what number of hydrants do we have pumping capacity to support and so forth? In other words, is our system sized appropriately to meet the potential wildfire risks that the fire people see? And so fleshing that topic out, I think, would be very helpful.
Commissioner Rob, or Commissioner Vane, I'm kind of reluctant to speak on that right now. I just don't want to put any misinformation out there. I do have a meeting tomorrow with Fire Chief, Wildland Fire Crew, and the City Manager's Office to discuss these things. We did have one citizen concern this week come in, and we provided them with the answers of our facility master plan does show that we can provide 2,000 to 3,500 gallons per minute out of a fire hydrant, but it does not necessarily address whether you have every hydrant on in a neighborhood. So again, I'm reluctant to speak to that without consulting with other people first.
Yeah, I know it's a tough problem, and I wasn't just looking for an immediate answer. I was really just saying in terms of a future agenda item, whether that's 1 month or 2 months or 3 months away.
No, I do think that would be, sorry, I'm still getting used to this, Commissioner Vane. Yes, I do think that would be a great thing to discuss in the near future.
Thank you. Karen?
It's Karen, and no items.
Ian?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Nothing. Vice Mayor Sweet, anything?
Great discussion, and thank you all for your questions and input.
Thank you. Lee?
Chairman Doba, no thank you, or no further comments.
Thank you. With that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Thank you all. We're adjourned.